Let your breath slow now, and let the world outside grow quiet and far away. 12,000 years ago, the great ice sheets that had draped the northern world for ages began, slowly, to melt. It was not a sudden change, but a long, unhurried exhale of the earth, spreading across thousands of years. The ice retreated northward, and as it did, the seas rose, gently and persistently, covering what had once been dry and living land. Beneath the waters of the North Sea and the Persian Gulf, beneath shelves of ocean that now seem always to have been ocean, there was once open ground. People walked there, gathered there, built shelters and made fires in hearths that still lie, silent, beneath the water. There were river valleys that have no names now, forests that became seabed, coastlines that exist only in the memory of the sediment below. Some researchers have found tools on the seafloor, hand axes and antler combs, resting in the silt as if left only a moment ago. The people who left them lived on the edge of a world that was changing around them, season by season, generation by generation. We do not know what they called themselves, or what they believed the sea was, as it came slowly toward them. Slowly, the coastlines they knew were swallowed, and the world their grandparents had described became something only imagined. And yet something of that world remains, waiting quietly below the surface of seas that seem unchanging. Tonight we will drift gently toward that world, and let it tell its quiet story, slowly, in the way that old things do. Long before any written word, vast walls of ice stretched across the northern world, creaking softly under their own immense weight. These glaciers moved with a patience we can barely imagine, pressing slowly southward over thousands of quiet years. At the heart of each glacier, deep within the blue ice, pressure built grain by grain across centuries. Then, around 12,000 years ago, something shifted in the warmth reaching down from the sky. The glaciers began to crack, slowly at first, long fracture lines tracing quietly across their ancient surfaces. Meltwater gathered in small pools along those cracks, still and pale, reflecting the open sky above. Those pools widened slowly across seasons, trickling at first, then carving narrow channels through the ice. Far away, at the glacier's edge, massive slabs calved into cold waters with a low, unhurried groan. The sea began to rise, a little each year, so gradually that no living eye could measure the change. Beneath those slowly rising waters, the edges of an inhabited world grew quiet and then still. Stone hearths, pathways worn smooth by feet, the outlines of shelters, all settled gently beneath the sea. The people who had walked those paths moved slowly inland, following the retreating shoreline season by season. And the glaciers kept groaning, slowly, unhurried, shaping a world that would take thousands of years to fully remember itself. Along the edges of the great ice sheets, water had begun its slow and patient work, rising with no hurry at all. Each year the sea crept a little further inland, touching grasses and stones it had never known before. Somewhere beneath what is now the Persian Gulf, a wide river valley lay open to the sky, green and unhurried. Hunters and gatherers moved along its banks in the cool mornings, following herds toward the inland hills. The valley was fed by 4 great rivers, and its waters ran clear and cold over smooth pale stone. Slowly, over many generations, the coastline to the south began to move northward, quietly swallowing the lower ground. A village built near the river's mouth would find the water lapping at its doorstones within a lifetime. No great wave came to announce it, only the tide that did not fully retreat, morning after quiet morning. Families gathered what they carried and walked toward higher ground, as their grandparents had taught them to do. And behind them, the water settled into the low places, still and green and patient. Over centuries the Persian Gulf filled in this way, slowly, the old valley floor becoming a warm and shallow sea. Carved stone tools and fire rings now rest somewhere on that seafloor, covered in a soft layer of silt. The sea holds them gently, as it has held them for 12,000 quiet years. Along what is now the shallow seafloor of the North Sea, people once built their homes beside calm river mouths. The land they walked was wide and green, stretching far beyond the shores we know today. In time, the ice far to the north began to release its grip, slowly and without announcement. The water came quietly, season by season, rising so gently that a single lifetime might not have noticed much at all. But across generations, the edge of the sea crept inland, swallowing meadows, then pathways, then the places where fires had burned. Coastal villages were abandoned not in panic but with a slow, reluctant knowing. What had been a doorstep became a tidal shallows, what had been a path became a channel where fish drifted silently. Fishermen working the North Sea today sometimes pull up stone tools, fragments of bone, and worked antler from their nets. These quiet objects rise from the seafloor as the only witnesses to a world that once breathed and moved and settled there. Far to the south, beneath the warm shallows of the Mediterranean, other villages tell a similar unhurried story. Off the coast of what is now Israel, the village of Adlit Yem rests preserved beneath the sea, its stone circles still standing. Its wells, its paved courtyard, the careful arrangement of its stones, all of it resting quietly in the salt water. Somewhere beneath these waters, a community once watched the same sunrise, and tended the same small fires through the night. Somewhere beneath the slow weight of centuries, hands once shaped stone with a patience we can barely imagine today. These were not hurried hands, but steady ones, moving through long warm afternoons at the edge of a world still breathing with ice. The people who lived here knew how to read the land, how to find water, how to place a stone so it would hold for generations. They built not for monuments but for shelter, for gathering, for the quiet rituals of a life lived close to the earth. In the valleys where rivers ran wide and clear, they laid the first floors, smoothed the first thresholds, raised the first walls. A carved groove in a lintel stone, worn smooth by 10,000 passing hands, is all that remains of a doorway no one will ever cross again. Slowly the ice retreated northward, and the seas that had once been distant began to move closer, year by quiet year. The settlements that had stood for generations found themselves at the edge of something they could not name or stop. In time the water came not as a flood but as a slow, patient rising, filling the lowest rooms first, then the streets, then the fields. The hands that had built so carefully left behind their tools in the mud, their hearthstones still warm with the memory of fire. Far away from any shore we know, a carved stone still sits beneath fathoms of water, its surface holding the faint lines of someone's careful work. We do not know their names, or what they called the rivers, or what songs they may have sung in the long evenings before the world changed. Only the stones remain, patient and still, holding in their weight the quiet proof that someone was here, and that their hands knew how to build something lasting. Somewhere beneath the quiet shallows of the North Sea, the seafloor holds things that once knew dry land. Divers moving slowly through cold green water have touched the edges of flint blades, still sharp after all this time. These are not scattered pebbles carried by tides, but carefully shaped tools, made by patient hands on solid ground. The ground those hands stood on has been beneath the ocean for more than 8,000 years. There was once a wide plain here, stretching from what is now Britain across to the coasts of Denmark and the Netherlands. People walked across it, sheltered from the wind in low valleys, and knapped stone near slow-moving rivers. The tools they left behind settled into the mud and stayed, long after the water rose and covered everything. Some were found by fishing nets, pulled up from depths where no sunlight reaches the bottom. Others have been found by patient underwater surveys, mapped and measured in the cold quiet of the shallows. Bone harpoons have come up too, shaped for hunting animals that no longer exist in that part of the world. The people who made these things were skilled and unhurried, building lives on land that seemed solid and permanent. Slowly, over centuries, the sea came in so gently that perhaps no single lifetime witnessed the whole change. And somewhere beneath the water now, a stone rests in the silt, still holding the shape a human hand once chose for it. Somewhere beneath the shallow gray-green water, the trunks of ancient trees still stand rooted in old soil. They are oak and pine, the same trees that shaded people walking along a coastline that no longer exists. Slowly, over thousands of years, the sea rose around them, quiet and patient, until the shore itself was gone. Divers off the coast of Wales sometimes swim through these ghost forests, drifting slowly between the standing trunks. In the Baltic Sea, the remains of pine forests rest on the sandy floor, preserved in the cold still water. The roots spread out just as they always did, holding soil that has long since drifted away with the currents. Along what was once the North Sea coast, a vast land called Doggerland stretched between Britain and the continent. People walked across it, camped beside rivers now buried under water, hunted in forests that now shelter fish. Fishermen have pulled up their bones and their tools and nets, small quiet pieces of a world no one remembered. In warmer southern waters, off the coasts of India, sonar has traced the outlines of stone walls below the surface. The stones lie in rows, arranged with the calm certainty of people who intended to stay in that place. Around them, the sediment holds pollen from trees and grasses that once grew in the open air of a shoreline. In time, the water covered everything, and the forest and the shore became a slow quiet memory beneath the sea. Long before any map was drawn, a wide and gentle land stretched between what we now call Britain and the European coast. It was a place of rivers and low hills, of marshes edged with reeds, and forests where the morning mist drifted slowly through the trees. People lived here, quietly, over many thousands of years, following the slow rhythms of seasons and water and animal movement. They left behind stone tools along riverbeds that no longer exist at the surface, resting now beneath layers of silt and salt water. Around 12,000 years ago, the great ice sheets of the north began, very gradually, to release their hold on the land. The water they carried returned to the sea, and the sea, in no great hurry, began to rise along every shore. The land we now call Doggerland did not vanish in a single storm but receded year by year, almost imperceptibly, over generations. What had been broad river deltas became shallow estuaries, and the estuaries in time became open water. Fishing trawlers working the North Sea today sometimes bring up ancient mammoth bones and worked antler, caught in their nets from the seafloor below. A carved piece of antler, shaped deliberately by human hands, lifted from water more than 100 feet below the surface. Somewhere beneath the gray-green waves of the North Sea, old hearths and campsites rest undisturbed in the sediment. Pollen cores drawn from the seafloor still carry traces of the ancient woodland that once grew there, hazel and pine and oak. And somewhere beneath those quiet waters, the last of Doggerland simply slipped beneath the surface, without witness, without sound. Long ago, before anyone thought to look, fishing boats drifted slowly above what had once been dry land. The nets went down as they always had, weighted and patient, sinking toward the soft sediment below. And sometimes, tangled among the ropes and mesh, something unexpected would rise with the catch. A curved fragment of bone, pale and smooth, older than anything the fisherman had expected to find. At first the fishermen set such things aside, uncertain what to make of them, returning quietly to their work. But the bones kept coming, season after season, from the same stretches of calm and shallow northern sea. Researchers who eventually received these fragments recognized something in their grain and density that spoke of great age. The bones had lain beneath the water for thousands of years, preserved in the cool and quiet of the seabed. Among the finds were tools as well, simple and worn, shaped by hands that had known this land before the sea arrived. A scraper here, a worked antler there, carried up from the dark quiet beneath by nets cast in the ordinary rhythm of a working day. The land these things had rested on was called Doggerland, a wide and gentle plain that stretched between what is now Britain and the European coast. It had been home to people for many thousands of years, before the melting ice slowly raised the seas and covered it. Now it rests beneath the North Sea, and now and then a net brings a small quiet piece of it back toward the light. Somewhere beneath layers of ancient soil, a scattering of pale ash still holds the warmth of a fire long extinguished. 12,000 years have passed since those embers cooled, yet the ash remains, quiet and undisturbed, as if waiting. The people who gathered around that fire watched the same stars we see tonight, perhaps in silence, perhaps in murmured conversation. In that age, the great ice sheets were retreating northward, slowly uncovering valleys and shores that had never felt open air. The world was rearranging itself, coastlines shifting, rivers finding new paths, forests beginning their long quiet march across bare land. Into this changing world, a community settled, built shelters, shaped tools from flint, and laid their fires on ground that felt permanent. That permanence, of course, was an illusion, as it always is, for the earth beneath them was still in motion. Slowly, the meltwater gathered in basins, in valleys, in the broad shallow troughs left by ice too heavy to imagine. And the sea rose, not in a single moment, but in the way that a tide returns, incrementally, year after year. The ash from that campfire may have been the last thing pressed into the soil before the water arrived. Divers have found those layers now, resting on the continental shelf in the stillness beneath the waves. There is something in those pale bands of ash that feels less like evidence and more like a message held in suspension. The fire has been cold for 12,000 years, and yet here we are, finding it, in the quiet below. Beneath a quiet stretch of coastal lowland, the ancient mud holds something patient and still. Thousands of years ago, when the ice was melting slowly away, people walked along the edge of a vanishing world. They left their footprints in the soft ground, and the rising water came quietly after them, sealing everything beneath. In certain places along the North Sea floor, those prints have remained, undisturbed, for more than 8,000 years. When the mud dried slowly in the warmth of that earlier world, it held the shape of a heel, a toe, the press of a small child's foot. Archaeologists who found them worked gently, crouching low, as if the silence of the place asked them to be careful. The footprints lay in sequence, a trail, as though someone had only just passed through and turned a corner somewhere out of sight. Alongside the human tracks, there were the prints of aurochs and red deer, pausing at what was once the soft bank of a river. That river has long since become sea, and the bank where those animals drank is now far beneath the waves. In the mud of Goldcliff in Wales, footprints from Mesolithic people emerged at low tide, patient as the estuary itself. The prints were small and large together, families perhaps, moving along the edge of a reed bed in the slow quiet of an afternoon. Around them the reeds would have moved gently, and the air would have carried the smell of water and wet earth. And then the tide turned, as it always does, and the mud closed over the morning, keeping it safe inside. Long before any living memory, there were children who grew up beside a sea that would not always be there. They learned the sounds of that water from the time they were very small, the way it settled against the shore each evening. Generations had built their lives here, in a place that felt as permanent as anything could feel. The elders had names for every inlet, every sandbar, every shallow place where the fish gathered in the warm months. Those names are gone now, carried away with the people who held them. The ice was melting far to the north, slowly, the way large things always change, almost too slowly to notice in a single life. But the sea was rising, season by season, creeping just a little higher against the stones they had always known. Perhaps some of the older ones spoke of it quietly, that the beach where they once played as children was now beneath the water. The children of that generation grew into adults who watched the water take a little more, year by year. There was no single morning when everything changed, only the slow accumulation of many quiet mornings. Somewhere beneath the Aegean, beneath the Persian Gulf, beneath the shallow North Sea, their hearths still rest undisturbed. The ash of their fires, the tools they set down one last time, the threshold stones of their doorways. And somewhere in all of that quiet ruin, perhaps the outline of a child's footprint pressed into clay, waiting still. As the great ice sheets continued their long retreat, the people of the coast began to look toward the interior lands. There was no urgency in this movement, only the quiet pull of seasons changing and rivers slowly widening their banks. Small groups followed the edges of retreating glaciers, walking where ice had lain only a generation before. Beneath their feet, the soil was still young, pale, and thin, barely begun to hold the memory of roots. Ahead of them, birch trees had already arrived, pale and slender, scattered across the newly freed land like quiet sentinels. The lakes they passed were still cold and very clear, holding the silence of 10,000 winters in their depths. Along those shores, they left the faintest traces, a hearth of river stones, a scattering of worked flint, a ring of post holes. These were not monuments meant to last but small resting places, warmth held briefly against the open sky. The coastline they had known since childhood was now somewhere behind them, lost to the slow rise of the sea. They carried with them the shapes of old tools, the memory of fishing grounds, and the names of drowned rivers. In time, the birch gave way to taller trees, oak and elm rising slowly as the centuries warmed and deepened. The land was filling with sound again after so long, birdsong, the creak of new wood, the rush of meltwater. And slowly, quietly, without anyone deciding it, a new home was being made in the place where the ice had been. Long before any map was drawn, meltwater from retreating glaciers began finding its way downhill through ancient stone. Water, unhurried and patient, pressed into every small crack, widening each one gradually over many quiet centuries. Across what is now the Mediterranean basin, rivers that had been frozen or locked beneath ice sheets began to flow again. Stone that had stood unchanged for thousands of years was gently, persistently shaped by the moving water finding its path. In the valleys of what was once a larger, drier land, new channels formed where none had existed before the warming came. The people who lived along those earlier rivers watched familiar landscapes change, season by quiet season. Where a river carved a new bend, communities that had gathered near water sometimes found themselves on a shifting shore. Slowly, the water etched deep grooves into softer rock, leaving behind walls and corridors that look almost built by hand. Far inland, rivers that once emptied into a vast connected plain now reached only dry stone beds where other rivers had been. In quieter moments, where the current slowed, sediment drifted down and settled in soft layers above whatever had been there before. Those layers, accumulating gently across centuries, buried the old ground surface along with everything resting on it. Somewhere beneath a riverbed that now looks ordinary, earlier ground may still hold the faint outlines of a life once lived. The rivers are still moving, still carving, still carrying the past quietly forward through stone and time. Long before the first cities rose, people who walked the warming earth already knew which plants would feed them through a hard season. As the great ice pulled back northward, the land beneath it breathed again, and rivers found new paths down through stone and clay. The people who lived through that slow transformation were watchers, patient and careful, reading the land the way a sailor reads open water. When floodwaters crept closer each season, some among them gathered seeds, the small, dry, quiet carriers of everything a plant knows how to become. They carried those seeds upward, following the ridgelines, moving steadily through oak scrub and open meadow toward the cooler heights. The highlands received them quietly, with thin soil and short summers, but also safety, ground that the sea could not easily reach. In these elevated places, small communities took root, building shelters against the wind and planting the seeds they had carried from the valley floors below. The seeds remembered the lower, richer soils, and yet they grew, slowly adapting to shorter seasons and thinner air and cooler nights. Archaeobotanists find these seeds preserved in the charred remains of highland hearths, small and perfect, sealed in ash for 12,000 years. Each seed is a quiet record, holding inside its shell the choices of a people who felt the world shifting and chose to move rather than wait. The highlands of what is now eastern Anatolia and the Fertile Crescent still hold the wild ancestors of wheat and barley in their stony meadows. Those wild grasses sway today much as they did then, unhurried, reaching upward into a sky that has watched the whole slow turning of this story. Somewhere in those seeds, carried uphill by careful hands before the lowlands were swallowed, something of that older world still quietly persists. Where rooftops once kept out the rain, the first seeds drifted down through still air and settled into cracks. Slowly, slender birches pushed pale roots between fitted stones that hands had placed 12,000 years before. The walls did not resist them, only held their shape a little longer beneath the arriving green. In time the canopy closed overhead and the light reaching old floors turned soft and scattered and green. Rain no longer fell the same way on those old hearths, but arrived gently, carried leaf by leaf. Where families had gathered around warmth, small ferns uncurled in the quiet, unhurried by anything. The forests that came were not the same forests that had stood before the ice, but something new and patient. Pollen carried by slow winds told this story long afterward, settling in layers in the beds of quiet lakes. Each layer a page, written in dust too fine to see, recording which trees had returned and in what order. Oak moved northward slowly, perhaps a few hundred meters in a good year, following warmth the way rivers follow low ground. Hazel came too, and with it the soft rustle of leaves over places where walls had once stood straight. Whatever had been built was now becoming something else, not erased, only held inside a longer kind of quiet. Far beneath the roots, the floors of those old rooms still held their shape, patient and undisturbed. Long before writing, the only way to hold a memory was to speak it aloud beside a fire. In those firelit circles, elders of the flooded civilization carried whole worlds inside their voices. A story repeated night after night for 100 generations begins to shape itself like water shaping stone. The elders described rising seas and drowned coasts in language that sounded, even then, like something half-remembered. Children listened at the edge of the firelight and carried those images into their own long lives. Certain images survived: a great flood, a vanished homeland, a world swallowed slowly by gray water. These are among the oldest themes woven through the oral traditions of people who lived near ancient coastlines. There is something in the rhythm of spoken memory that holds a shape longer than any single voice. Even across 10,000 years, a pattern can survive if it is spoken carefully enough, generation to generation. The stories did not need to be perfectly accurate to carry something true at their center. That truth was simple: once, long ago, the land reached further, and the sea was elsewhere. The memory of that lost shore has been carried quietly in the oldest stories of many peoples near the sea. And somewhere in those patient, unhurried tellings, the vanished world left a faint and enduring trace. Long before any living memory, certain people drew the outlines of shores that no longer exist above the water. These old maps, spread flat on stone tables or rolled in scrolls, traced the edges of a world the ice once held in place. Some scholars, quietly turning the pages of these documents, began to notice that certain coastlines did not match any shore alive today. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, showed a southern landmass with a smoothness and detail that seemed to reach back far beyond its own century. That southern coastline on the map matched the shape of Antarctica as it lies beneath its ice, a shape only modern instruments have confirmed. How cartographers of 5 centuries ago came to draw those hidden contours is a question that rests quietly without a firm answer. Other old maps showed broad plains where the North Sea and the Baltic now lie, gentle lands that were real before the ice retreated. Geologists call that drowned northern plain Doggerland, and its shape can still be traced in the contours of the seafloor beneath the waves. Fishermen dragging their nets across the southern North Sea sometimes bring up bones of animals and worked flint tools from that buried world. Each recovered object is a quiet letter from a shore that has not been dry land for more than 8,000 years. Along the coastlines of the Persian Gulf, old maps and seafloor scans suggest there was once a river valley, green and wide, now lying under warm shallow water. In the deep of a clear night, if you could stand where that valley was, you would be breathing air 60 meters below the present sea. The maps that show these vanished lands are not proof of mystery so much as quiet records of how much has changed, and how slowly the world forgets. Long before written history, people stood on the open water and looked up at the same slow river of stars we see tonight. They learned the sky the way we learn a familiar road, by traveling it so many times it becomes something felt rather than remembered. There was a star low in the northern sky that barely moved while all the others wheeled slowly around it through the night. Mariners came to know that star the way you know the position of your own doorway in the dark. When the ice was retreating and the sea was still rising, small groups paddled across straits and channels that would later vanish beneath the water. They carried no instruments, only the slow-turning sky above them and the dark shape of a current moving beneath their hull. The Pleiades rose in the east each spring with an almost clockwork patience, telling sailors when the calmer sailing months had come again. On the shores of the Aegean, where old towns now sit beneath the water, people watched those same stars and timed their journeys accordingly. Orion too was a kind of clock for them, his slow climb upward through winter nights marking the months before the spring crossings. These were not abstract calculations but something closer to a quiet understanding, built up over hundreds of generations of watching. In the slow centuries after the ice melted, whole networks of seafarers moved between islands, memorizing star paths the way a singer memorizes a long and unhurried song. Some of those routes, and the people who knew them, are now far below the surface of the sea, resting quietly in the silt. But the stars they steered by are still there, turning overhead tonight, the same patient lights they always were. Somewhere beneath the still surface of the Mediterranean, the outlines of ancient harbors rest undisturbed in soft sediment. Stone quays that once guided wooden boats now lie tilted gently on the seafloor, draped in slow-growing sea grass. Around 12,000 years ago, seas were much lower, and coastal settlements thrived along shores that no longer exist above the water. As glaciers melted slowly across thousands of years, the rising water crept landward, covering harbors, jetties, and the gentle slopes of fishing villages. In the eastern Mediterranean, divers have traced the remains of submerged stone walls that once formed the edge of inhabited bays. These walls extend in quiet lines across the seafloor, as if the village simply chose to rest there rather than vanish. Off the coast of the Black Sea, researchers have found evidence of freshwater settlements that the rising saltwater slowly swallowed whole. The wooden structures are long dissolved, but the stone foundations remain, patient and still in the cool depths below. In the Indian Ocean, ancient port stones have been found submerged near coastlines that were once dry land at the height of the last ice age. These places were not lost to catastrophe but to the slow and patient rise of water across many generations of human memory. People who once walked those harbor paths may have watched the sea rise a little each season, moving inland quietly with their boats. The memory of those shores may have drifted into the oldest stories humans tell about floods and waters that rose and swallowed the land. And far below the surface now, those harbors remain in their silence, resting where the water finally settled and chose to stay. Somewhere beneath the warm, shallow sea, old walls lie patient and still, wrapped in living coral. The coral came slowly, one tiny polyp at a time, settling on carved stone edges as centuries drifted past. What was once a wall holding up a roof is now a garden, quiet and unhurried in the current. The sea floor here holds the outline of streets, gentle curves where people once walked in morning light. 12,000 years ago, before the ice finished melting, this place breathed open air and sky. Fish drift now through doorways that once framed a view of hills and clouds and a quieter sea. A carved stone threshold, still level after all this time, rests beneath a soft blanket of sea moss. The walls are not crumbling the way ruins on land crumble, the sea holds them gently, almost carefully. Staghorn coral spreads across an old courtyard in slow branching arms, tracing the shape of the space below. In certain light, at certain angles, you can almost read the intention in how the stones were placed. The settlement here may have held thousands, a whole quiet world that knew nothing of the rising water coming. Slowly the tide of 10,000 years covered it, floor by floor, wall by wall, unhurried as breath. Tonight the coral continues its patient work, and the walls remember nothing, and the sea asks nothing back. Somewhere beneath the quiet surface of the sea, a small object rested in the soft sediment for thousands of years. It was a figurine, carved by human hands, smooth and worn by the slow patience of deep water. Divers moving slowly through the blue found it almost by chance, their hands brushing the silt aside with great care. The figurine was small enough to hold in one palm, and yet it carried the weight of an entire world within it. Archaeologists believe it was shaped somewhere along a coastline that no longer exists above the waves. The people who made it lived in a time when the great ice sheets were still slowly releasing their hold on the earth. Sea levels were rising, gently but without pause, swallowing the edges of their world little by little over generations. Someone carried this figurine to the shore, or perhaps it was inside a dwelling when the water finally came. Now it rests in a museum, behind glass, lit softly from above, still holding whatever meaning its maker gave it. No one can say with certainty what it represented, a spirit, an ancestor, a quiet prayer shaped from stone. It is one of the oldest human-made objects ever recovered from beneath the sea, older than most cities on land. Slowly, researchers piece together the settlement where it may have originated, mapping the drowned landscape below. And the figurine remains, patient and still, a quiet messenger from a world that slipped beneath the water long ago. Somewhere in the settlement, an elder sat by the water's edge as the seasons turned slowly around her. She had walked these shores since childhood, and the land she knew was already older than memory could reach. In the language spoken here, there were words for glaciers that no living person had ever seen. Those words had been passed down through generations like smooth stones carried from a distant riverbed. She remembered her grandmother's voice describing a great cold that had gripped the world before her time. The ice, her grandmother had said, once stood as tall as the trees at the edge of the world. Now only the sea remained where the ice had been, wide and still and without a shore. She would tell the younger ones to listen carefully to words that seemed to have no use anymore. Somewhere beneath the water, she believed, lay the bones of places her ancestors had called home. Not as a story of loss, but as a simple truth the sea had quietly accepted into itself. The younger ones would sit near her in the long evenings, listening without hurry to her slow words. She spoke of the world before as if it were simply another season, unhurried and without grief. And when the last of those words finally passed from memory, the sea continued on, as still as before. Long before any alphabet was carved into stone, people spoke words that named the rivers and the shorelines around them. Those words carried the shapes of the land, the color of certain seasons, the feel of a particular wind off the water. As the ice slowly retreated and the seas began to rise, entire coastlines where those languages lived slipped quietly beneath the surface. The words for shallow crossing, for the island where the herons gathered, for the inlet that froze each winter, all of them went with the tide. Linguists have traced faint echoes in surviving languages, syllables that seem to carry the memory of shores that no longer exist. In certain coastal dialects, older people use words for which there is no clear origin, words that feel older than the language around them. Perhaps some of those syllables drifted forward through generations, long after the land they named had vanished beneath the water. The great flooded plain between Britain and what is now northern Europe was once a land of rivers, forests, and settled communities. That place, sometimes called Doggerland, would have held its own names for its own rivers, its own hills, its own crossings. None of those names survived, because none of the people who spoke them found a way to carry the words to higher ground before the water came. In other parts of the world, oral traditions remember the flooding, stories passed down of a time when the land extended much farther than it does today. Those memories survived because someone kept speaking them, kept repeating them to the next generation across many lifetimes. And somewhere beneath the quiet water, the rest of those languages rest in the deep slow stillness, unhurried, undisturbed, and patient. Long ago, narrow boats carried obsidian and amber along coastlines that no longer exist above the water. The merchants who paddled those routes knew every inlet, every sandbar, every sheltered cove by heart. Slowly, as the ice continued melting far to the north, the sea climbed a little higher each generation. A trading post built near the water's edge in one lifetime was knee-deep in surf by the next. The routes themselves did not vanish all at once, but shifted quietly, year by quiet year. Somewhere beneath the Aegean Sea, carved stone pathways still traced the old roads between islands that once stood above the tide. Divers have found hand-worked flint and smoothed clay vessels resting quietly on the seabed, far from any shore. In time, the communities that had depended on those sea roads simply had nowhere left to gather and trade. Far away in the North Sea, a vast low plain once connected Britain and Denmark, and trading camps dotted its gentle river valleys. Slowly that whole plain sank beneath gray water, and the trails worn into its soil dissolved into soft sediment. The amber that once passed hand to hand along those routes still washes ashore sometimes, smoothed by millennia of tides. It carries no memory of the hands that traded it, only a quiet warmth in the palm, as old as the world before the flood. The sea kept rising, and the routes faded, and the civilization that had built them became part of the quiet ocean floor. Long before these peaks were called mountains, they were low rounded hills rising gently from a warmer, wetter plain. The ice that once pressed down upon the land has slowly, over countless seasons, pulled back and released its hold. And as the weight of those ancient glaciers lifted, the ground beneath began, almost imperceptibly, to rise. This is a process that continues even now, so gradual that no living creature could ever sense it happening. What were once gentle hillsides 12,000 years ago have been quietly climbing ever since the ice released them. Somewhere in Scandinavia, the land has risen nearly 400 meters since the last great ice retreated. Old shorelines once at sea level are now carved into cliff faces far above the water, quiet witnesses to the change. The forests that grew along those ancient shores were drowned slowly as meltwater filled the lowlands and the coasts retreated inward. In the Scottish Highlands, peat bogs still hold the preserved remnants of those drowned woodlands, roots reaching into dark ancient soil. The hills of what is now northern Britain were then a continuous ridge of higher ground, connected to the European plain below. A traveler walking those ridgelines 12,000 years ago would have looked down on a wide inhabited valley, not an open sea. The rivers that drained those valleys still flow, though now they empty into a sea that covers the floors where people once walked. And the hills that remain above water carry that quiet history within them, rising still, unhurried, as if remembering what they were.